And finally, on the topic of contracts, meron tayong mga tinatawag na defective contracts where this is arranged in a manner na from the lighter defects to the more grave defects ng contracts are discussed in this topic. So there are four kinds of defects of contract. We have what we call rescissible contracts. We have voidable contracts, we have unenforceable contracts, and void or inexistent contracts. So here, we have rescissible contracts. Okay. Ano ba itong mga rescissible contracts? Generally, these rescissible contracts are valid contracts. However, they can be rescinded by competent court. Naalala nyo naman siguro yung last time, no? Yung discussion natin on rescission. So, yes, they are valid, but if they can be invalidated, they can be rescinded by the court. Okay. On what basis? Usually, itong rescissible contracts are usually involves damage or lesion na tinatawag, So itong sa rescissible contracts, ito yung mga defects na pwedeng mag-fall under rescissible contracts. Kung ba ito yung mga pwedeng maging rason kung para i-rescind yung contract. Una, damage or lesion to guardians and absentees. So, for example, you are the legal guardian ng isang tao, ng isang unemancipated minor, for example, minor de edad siya, pero meron siyang properties, pero since you are the guardian, ang ginawa mo is binenta mo yung property, the same with executors and administrators, I believe. So binenta mo yung property and absentees rather. So binenta mo yung property na kumbaga at a very low price, to the point na almost one-fourth nung value ng property ay nawala doon sa sale or doon sa disposition na ginawa mo. So kumbaga because of yung pagbenta mo at a lower price, nagkaroon ng economic disadvantage yung iyong guardian, yung ward rather, or yung nagkaroon ng damage yung absentee. For example, pinabenta sa iyo kasi nasa ibang bansa siya, pero because of yung pagbenta mo ng mura, ganyan, nawalan ng one-fourth ng supposedly na matatanggap niya from the proceeds of the sale. So that is lesion or damage. Also, another rescissible contract is contract in fraud of creditors. For example, ganito. May mga naghahabol sa iyo na mga nakautangan mo. What do you do in order to avoid yung paniningil nila? What you do is dispose yung mga properties mo or magbayad ng mga utang mo na hindi pa naman due, undemandable. Kumbaga, i-transfer mo sa iba, ibenta mo sa iba yung property, ibigay mo sa mga kamag-anak mo or sa mga trusted people mo yung property para kapag habulin ka na ng mga creditors mo, wala silang makikita basically. So that is a contract in fraud of creditors. So for example, binenta mo yung lupa mo para or binigay mo siya rather dinonate mo siya sa isang friend na pinamigay mo yung bagay para in case na maghabol yung creditors, wala ka talaga mapapakita. That's a contract in fraud of creditors, and that can be rescinded by the courts. Or contracts involving things under litigation without the consent of yung plaintiff. So for example, you are the defendant in a case, tapos yung property is under litigation. Kumbaga nililitis pa lang sa kaso, pero ang ginawa mo, yung property na yon ay binenta mo para later on walang if ever manalo yung naghabla sa wala siyang makukuha. Well, that is a rescissible contract. Ano? So if under lease pendants yung property, kumbaga dahil kunwari subject of a court action yung property, hindi pa na-settle kung sino may-ari, pero dahil binenta mo na yung lupa para eventually wala na. Parang in fraud of yung plaintiffs, nang walang consent ng plaintiffs yung pagbenta mo, that is a rescissible contract. So again, these contracts are not really that are not have minor defects, but these defects can lead to the rescission of the contract by a competent court. Again, emphasis on the rescission by a competent court, kasi only a competent court can rescind or can can invalidate a rescissible contract. Okay? Hindi pwedeng rescissible 'yan. I-rescind na natin. Hindi pwede 'yan. Okay? So, that is rescissible contracts. Another type of defective contract is avoidable contract. So, avoidable contract is valid until annulled. Valid until annulled. So, if there's no action to if there's no action to annul the contract, well, it remains valid. Kasi in truth, valid naman siya, no? Kaya lang, it can be annulled. There is a reason to annul the contract, or there is a reason to invalidate the contract also. So here, what can be the source? Ano yung mga pwedeng maging rason para maging voidable ang isang contract? First is legal incapacity to give consent of one of the contracting parties. Remember, gaya nung nasabi ko kanina, for consent to be valid, kailangan yung parties can legally has the legal capacity to enter into a contract, Pero if one of the parties is not capable of giving consent, or is not does not have the legal capacity, kunwari minor yung isa sa mga parties, it can be voidable in the sense na valid siya, yes, pero it can be annulled. There is if you have cause to annul it, kumbaga if you file an action in court annulling yung contract, then it can be annulled. May reason para i-annul siya. Also, if there is a vice of consent of one of the contracting parties. Remember, yung kanina, di ba nakita natin yung mga vices of consent, yung duress, undue influence, mga ganyan. So, if there's vice of consent, kahit yung isa sa mga enumerations na nabanggit natin before, if there's vice of consent of one of the contracting parties, the contract is voidable. Dahil voidable itong contract na ito, ibig sabihin, pwede mo siyang i-annul. Pero the caveat here is it is not voidable forever. It is not voidable forever. Kung for example, alam mo na legally incapacitated pala yung isang party sa contract nyo, or nagkaroon ng vice, for example, ikaw yung in-intimidate, pero nung wala ng threat or wala ng undue influence, hindi mo pa rin inannul yung contract, after a while it becomes cured. Kumbaga nako-cure siya. What do you mean when you say it's cured? Na siya, magiging valid na siya. Hindi mo na pwedeng i-contest yung validity niya, kasi you have the sufficient time para i-question yung validity niya. Pero dahil nga hindi mo ginawa, yung right mo to annul the contract may be waived. So yan, pwedeng after a while mako-cure na yung defect. So dahil cured na yung defect, wala nang defect, and it becomes a valid contract. Again, dahil voidable nga siya, valid nga siya until it is annulled. So you have to annul it first kung gusto mong mawala yung contract, kung gusto mong ma-invalidate yung contract. Okay? Next is unenforceable. Ano naman tong unenforceable? Uh, Basically, itong unenforceable, it means na it cannot be enforced by a proper action in court. So kung yung rescissible at voidable kanina, may remedyo pa, it can be enforced by yung kunwari, kung if there is vice of consent, or kung merong if it's a contract in fraud of creditors, you can rescind or you can annul yung contract dun sa unang dalawa sa taas. Pero dito sa unenforceable, wala kayong recourse. Kumbaga, hindi nyo siya pwedeng hindi nyo siya pwedeng enforce sa court because there is really substantial defect in the contract. Merong malalang defect sa contract na hindi mo siya mai-enforce sa korte. Kahit na anong gawin mong pagkaso, it will just be kumbaga there's no the court cannot resolve it. Okay? What are examples? Contracts entered into the name of another if in the name of owner without authority or in excess of authority. Kumbaga, kapag yung if you are for example an agent ng isang tao, kumbaga ang authority lang sa iyo ay paano nito? Ang authority lang sa iyo ay ibenta yung lupa at ibigay yung proceeds doon sa tao. Yung sa principal mo. Kumbaga, ikaw si ahente ng lupa, ang authority mo lang ibenta yung lupa tapos ibigay yung pera doon sa may-ari. Pero ang ginawa mo is as agent, ang ginawa mo binenta mo yung lupa, nakuha mo yung pera, ang ginawa mo bumili ka ng sasakyan. That contract is unenforceable because that is yung subsequent na pagbili mo ng sasakyan ay wala yun sa authority mo. Or contracts entered into sa pangalan ng principal pero yung yung kunwari, ang sinabi lang ng principal sa kanya, ang ibenta mo lang ay 1 hectare ng lupa. Pero ang binenta mo ay 2 hectares na lupa ng principal. So yung contract covering yung sale ng 1 hectare ay unenforceable. Kumbaga, because it is in excess of authority na binigay sa ng owner. So that is an unenforceable contract. So again, also, if there's non-compliance to the statute of frauds or there is no writing in if a contract is not in writing in violation of yung tinatawag natin na statute of frauds, kasi may mga listahan ng mga contracts that need to be written gaya nga ng na-discuss natin kanina under the statute of frauds, kapag di mo yun na-comply yung contract is unenforceable by law. And also, if both parties are incapacitated to act, if yung parehong parties ay walang capacity to act, for example, pareho silang minors, nag-contract yung dalawang minors, that is unenforceable. So it cannot be, kumbaga, yung contract na yun, kahit anong gawin mo, hindi mo siya pwedeng enforce sa court. Okay? Yun. So, if for example, merong without kung merong excess of authority, for example, hindi naman yun yung sinabing gawin mo pero ginawa mo siya, yung contract na yun, na resulting contract nung pagsuway mo dun sa utos ng principal mo, is in excess of authority, so yung contract na yun cannot be enforced in court. Hindi ka pwedeng maka-obtain diyan hindi ka pwedeng maka-obtain diyan ng anything because that is unenforceable. So yan, or if in a contract dalawang minors ang nag-enter into the contract, none of the parties can claim anything from that contract because it cannot be enforced in court. No? So, yan. And finally, the most defective of all of them is itong void or inexistent. Itong void or inexistent contract, it does not create rights and cannot impose obligations. Hindi ka pwedeng mag-create ng karapatan dito sa defective rights at hindi ka rin pwedeng mag-impose ng obligations. Why? Okay? Because in the first place, it's not a contract, or if yun. So, hindi siya contract. So, there's a defect in one or all, one or some or all of the the requisites of contracts. 'Di ba? Remember natin yung COC, ano? Merong defect either sa consent, sa object, or sa consideration. Una, if it's contrary to law, morals, and good customs, public order, and public policies. LMGPP na naman tayo, ano? So, if it's contrary to LMGPP, it is void, no? Kasi nga ano yung defect dito? Uh, anong requisite ng contract ang defective dito? Here ang defective ay yung object, ano? The object of the contract itself is against the law, or against morals, against good customs, against public order, against public policy. So dahil wala tayong object, hindi siya contract. So it's void or inexistent. It does not exist in the first place as a contract. Or contract is expressly prohibited by law. Gaya nga nung nasabi natin kanina, yung donation ng spouses to each other, that is expressly prohibited by law. Therefore, it's void. It has no effect. It does not create rights. It does not impose obligations. Ano? And of course, inexistent contract, yung tinatawag natin na if one or some of the requisites of a valid contract is inexistent. For example, wala namang cause, or wala namang object, ano? Or worse, walang consent, no? So that's not a contract at all. That is inexistent. So ito yung mga klase ng defective contracts under the law. So unfortunately, you need to familiarize yourself dito sa mga contracts na to, kasi later on tatanungin kayo kung ano yung anong klaseng contract anong klaseng defect ang meron yung contract na to, at anong klaseng defective contract siya. Is it rescissible, voidable, unenforceable, or void or inexistent? This is a major part of yung this is a major part of your exam, so be wary of this. So again, under rescissible contracts, nagkaroon ng damage yung guardian or absentee, or yung estate in the case of executors or administrators. There's contract in fraud of creditors, mga ganyan. If it's a contract involving things which are subject of litigation, or nasa pa lang, nililitis sa korte, no? So those are yung those are the things that we need to consider. So those are rescissible contracts. Voidable contracts naman, which are valid until annulled, yung kapag yung walang legal capacity yung isa sa mga contracting parties, or there is vice of consent. Again, yung vice of consent is yung duress, undue influence, mga ganyan, yung mga nabanggit natin kanina na vices of consent. So unenforceable naman, or it cannot be enforced by a proper action in court, is yung contracts entered into in excess of authority, in the name of the owner without authority or in excess of authority, non-compliance, solicitation to frauds, or both parties are incapacitated to act. And it is void or inexistent, and it does not create rights or impose obligations if it's contrary to law, morals, good customs, public order, and public policy. If it's a contract expressly prohibited by law, and if it is inexistent, is if one of the requisites of a valid contract does not exist. So contracts are actually the concept of contracts is really long. Medyo mahaba rin yung coverage ng contracts, because of yung limited time natin. We limited our discussion to these important matters in contracts. So if you have questions later, we will entertain them in class as usual. And again, you need to exercise caution in reading yung mga provisions ng obligations and contracts, because they can be nakakalito sometimes, no? So thank you guys, and good evening. Thank you for listening.